Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Good to see you. We're talking about launching a first of its kind medical education platform and podcast today. How do you launch a successful podcast that pays? We're going to talk to somebody who's done it. My name is Dr. Elsie Coe. I am the founder and CEO of Lead Physician Leadership Program for Physicians and also the Chief Medical Officer of American Endovascular and Amputation Prevention. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to hear these videos and be notified when they come. Lead Physicians, all about bringing passion, purpose, and potential back to our physicians. So let me just introduce to you Dr. Aaron Fritts. Before he comes on, I want to tell you a little bit about him. He's the co-founder, okay, and CEO of BackTable. It's a podcast network for physician specialists. And he's a part-time practicing interventional radiologist, but early in his career, Aaron realized the need for centralized in-depth procedure and device information that his peers could access on the fly. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, not long after that, BackTable was born. And because he's been so successful in what he's doing, he not only practices interventional radiology in the United States, but he lives in Paris, France, and he's building a network there too. I'm going to bring him on board right now. Hey there, Aaron. How are you?
Hey, good, Elsie. Thank you so much for that intro.
Thank you. You're not in Paris right now, I see. You told me
No,
you're in Texas
yeah,
practicing.
yes, I'm on a 2 week stretch of locums, and I'll be heading back to Paris on Friday.
Yeah, what a
But
life. Nice.
yeah,
Love it.
jet set. My wife, my mom calls me the jet setter now.
Yeah. So
Um,
tell us a little bit about your whole back to your story. And I have some pictures if you want to if you
yeah,
just tell me, I'll share them with the audience.
yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. Big fan. Watching you also grow on LinkedIn as a fellow podcaster and content creator. And I love this platform, StreamYard. This is my first time seeing it. And I love how you're able to do that intro and everything. So definitely something I want to check out. Um, and notes to Kieran, let's look into this. But yeah, I thank you for having me on to tell my story about it was like 2017. Myself and a good family friend, Anish Parikh. Yeah, Anish there, he's not a physician, but everybody in his family is. Anish and my wife, Gopi, grew up together.
There's your wife.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wife, Gopi. And Gopi's an ENT. And so we were having Anish and his family over, and we were sitting around, I think, drinking beers, watching ice hockey. Anish is a hockey fan like me. And, I was telling him about what I do, and he was telling me a little bit about what he does. And I said, Anish, I've always wanted to create like this app. I had this idea in fellowship, and I never really had the resources to put together. And I told him about what we do as interventional radiologists and how I was traveling in a different hospital every week. I'm part of a big group, and we use all these different devices, and every hospital system seemed to have different devices on their shelf. And I wanted like a centralized sort of crowdsourced resource where we could share information about our experience with devices and our experience with procedures in sort of an organized way. And Anisha was like, well, I know app developers. I can help you, put something like that together. He said, and because he has this knowledge from being part of a physician family, his brothers actually in IR,
Oh,
Nainish Parikh.
wow.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Nainish Parikh is down. He actually trained at NYU. He's down at Moffitt Cancer Center. And another brother's a bariatric surgeon. So yeah, and then his dad's a vascular surgeon. His mom's a radiologist.
Oh my
So
God.
so it's like a brain trust, right? Of
Yes.
surgeons. And
That's a good friend
so
to have. Niche who
yeah,
has that
yeah,
background.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Anish, so he kind of knew where I was coming from, and it made sense. And so we created the app, and it had mild success. I mean, physicians are busy. I was really trying to get docs to like write reviews about devices, kind of like you do on Amazon,
Got it.
and it wasn't really it wasn't as popular as were hoping. And so Anish actually had this idea. He said, "Hey, you could either write a blog and Elsie, you and I have talked about writing before, to help as
Yeah.
content, as content marketing to try and bring people to the app
Mhm.
or create a podcast. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really like hearing myself talk, and I don't know really what I have to say. And he was like, Aaron, did you ever listen to Car Talk on NPR? And I said, yeah, I love that show. And he was like something like that. Like, it's fun. Let's make it fun. Let's not make it stale or formal. Because when I thought of podcasts, I thought of like, nothing against societies and journals, but the ones I listened to felt very just dry, And so he was like, no, we're going to change it up. We'll make it a little bit more informal, more conversational. And so Chris Beck and I started doing. Chris Beck's another IR, somebody that I knew from Vanderbilt from training, and him and I and Anish started podcasting, and we had some of my, we just brought on our network in the early days, and that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to some of them, and Dr. Jonathan Runback is in part of
Yeah.
American Endovascular. I just listened to that again before we got on here. I think it's fantastic because you're kind of hitting the sweet spot of what everybody wants to hear. Whether you're an early career physician or someone who's starting to learn how to do a certain type of procedure, and you just want to know what what we don't talk about in the meetings, right?
Yes.
We don't always have to talk about evidence-based. What is yes, we have the research, but then what is your experience? And people who are experts in that field is fantastic. I mean, I was interested. I wanted to hear it again and again. So I think it's you've hit the hammer on the nail. So tell us a little bit about how you got these people to be podcast hosts.
Yes, this amazing cast of characters.
And
So
not
Chris,
just interventional, like you have ENT,
yeah,
you have urology and innovation. Tell us about that.
yeah. So starting with IR, because it was started out as Chris and I, and then shortly after that, Michael Barazza came on. So Chris, Mike, and I, and then Brian Hartley, who's on the Innovation Show. We all know each other from Vanderbilt. So Chris, those
Mm,
guys were all residents while I was a fellow at Vanderbilt.
wow.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so when Michael heard what we were doing, he wanted to get involved. And so he kind of like, we always joke that he kind of, forced his way in, but he's a fun loving guy. So we definitely let him in, and he loves talking about this stuff just like we do. So in the early days, it was him, me, and Chris, and then Brian started. Brian Hartley is very much in. He did the Stanford Biodesign program,
Hmm.
and he has a startup device company in the pulmonary space, and he wanted to kind of bring on other entrepreneurs and device startup founders, guys like Mahmoud Razavi,
Hmm.
Gary Ansel. Those some big names. He told the Palmez story, had Julio Palmez on.
You've
And
got
so
some big guys in there.
I
It's
know, right?
amazing.
Yeah.
And girls.
And goes, yeah. And then, so then after that, Sabine joined us. Sabine was a frequent guest on the show. And finally I was like, Sabine, you seem to really like this, man. Do you want to start hosting with us? And he was like, yes, please. And then kind of the same thing with Allie. Allie was like, she reached out to me one day and she was like, I really enjoy listening to y'all's show. Would you be okay if I started guest hosting? And yeah, I said, sure. And then sure enough, she became a regular host pretty quickly.
Wow.
And we're all private practice, on
Wow.
that side, on the IR side. Now,
Unbelievable.
yeah. So then we created this, I don't want to say popular, but we created this podcast which we saw people saw value in, right, in the vascular and interventional space. And then my wife Gopi, who actually helped Anish and I start BackTable in the early days, she was a financial partner. She was also like, she gave me the time to work on it. That's what we always kind of joke about. Like
You couldn't have done it without her.
I couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 2 little kids, right? And I'm like
Yeah.
burning the midnight oil working on this stuff, and with Anish. And so finally, she was like, "Hey, it's my time. Like I see how much fun you guys are having on the Vascular Interventional show. I want to do this for ENT, and I want to do it with a good friend and partner of mine, Ashley Agan. And Ashley and Gopi were both. Ashley was Gopi's resident when Gopi was a fellow and attending at UT Southwestern. And so they launched the ENT show it was like September 2020.
Wow.
So yeah, they're approaching their 100th show here, probably like in the next few months,
Yep.
or 100th episode. And then something similar happened with, so Jose Silva was also an early supporter of BackTable because he saw the potential for urology. So he came on real early, back when we had the app. Actually, he was writing reviews for urologic devices on the app, and then finally I was like, Jose, like, it seems like this is working for Faster Interventional. It's working for ENT. I think it'd be great to create a urology show. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And because we don't like to have a show all around one host,
Yep.
because I don't want the whole show to fall on
Yeah.
one person's shoulders. People are
Right.
busy, right? So we
Yeah.
want it to be kind of a group effort.
How do you
And
choose
so
your topics? How do you even know what people want to hear?
I know,
I mean, look at that. Look at, you have 650,000 podcast plays plus
yeah.
400 plus
Yeah.
episodes, 21,000 active listeners, 8,000 monthly site. That's incredible. You
Yeah.
obviously have a knack of picking the right topics.
Well, I think it's just it's practical stuff. It's stuff that, again, I don't come up with all the ideas myself. It's crowdsourced. It's coming from people that we meet on social media. It's coming. I mean, granted, like, there's a process to determining what's going to make a good show, but as long as somebody, like, here's my number one criteria. Whenever somebody says, "Hey, I want to come on the show," but I'm not quite sure what I want to talk about, I say, just whatever you're passionate about, because that energy is going to come through to the audience. Yeah, exactly. There might be biliary drainage catheters might be really hot next year or something like that. But if nobody's interested in talking about it, we're not going to have it on the show.
Yep. Yep.
And so that's kind of how it's energy first and foremost.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, there's so many people out there having their own podcast, and a lot of people are not successful like you are. So can you give us some advice to those of us who want to really take it to the next level, and also you maybe even get funding? So what are the top things that you can share with us for people who want to do that?
Yeah, I'd say number one, and I learned this by just random luck, first of all, and then it was reinforced when I started going to these podcast conferences. There's a big one called Podcast Movement, and it's every 6 months, and it's in so much valuable information. So if you're launching a podcast, I highly recommend, yes, go to Podcast Movement. I think it's like podcastmovement.com, but just Google it. It is incredibly helpful. You'll meet all kinds of individuals from the podcast industry. You'll be energized by the podcast industry. Like, I hate to say it, but it's way more fun than, our interventional radiology conferences. Just because, I mean, they have
How dare
events
you?
that they do. I know, right?
Just kidding.
First of all, I recommend that. The second thing is just like, and this is what I was talking about in the beginning, is you got to know your audience. You have to know who your audience is to have a successful podcast. If you're just going to just talk about whatever's on your mind, what you had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that day, maybe somebody's interested in that, but it's going to be really hard to define that person.
Right.
And so for us, we were lucky in that we knew that our audience was guys and gals like us, basically interventional radiologists who are 0 to 10 years out, who are already jumping on the phone every week, calling each other on the way to work. Hey, I got this on my schedule today. I haven't done one of these in like 2 years. Like, it's an adrenal vein sampling. Like, hey, what's your technique, man? What do you use? Like, how do you get into the right? I forget. And so those kinds of things, those kinds of pearls that we're already talking to each other about, let's get it out there for everybody. Right.
Right. And sometimes those pearls are not readily available in the regular meetings too, because now they're so advanced for people who've been doing it. Right. And you just want to know what's the latest and greatest. But if you're that guy who wants to do something you haven't done in a while, this is so good for that.
I hate to say it, but you're right. We kind of dumb it down a bit to, it's like, we're not going to go in like deep into the literature, right? Or we're not going to, our guests are pretty savvy and they're experts. and some of them will source relevant papers, but that's not the point of the podcast. The point of the podcast is to
The
get
most useful stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. More
Yeah. I
practical.
mean, I don't think you're dumbing it down at all. In fact, like the podcast with Dr. Runback, you were talking about flexion extension at the SFA popliteal junction, and you're talking about, the two different kind of stents that are out there, and like what do you do before that? I mean, really cutting edge stuff, but practical things that everyone should know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the sweet spot. So like the young attendings that want practical information, and it could be private practice and academic. What we've tried to do is balance it out on every show because like, for example, on the vascular and interventional show, we're all all of our hosts are private practice guys.
Okay.
Whereas on ENT, they're all academic, Gopi National academic. So for both of us, I have to be like, hey, we got to look at getting more academic people on so that we're not all private practice focused.
Right.
And, like we're not doing OBO episodes every week.
Exactly.
And same with Gopi and Ashley. I'll say, hey guys, get some more private practice people on because they're doing more office-based procedures, and people want to hear about that.
Yep.
So it's kind of finding that balance with each of the shows.
Yep. My husband's
really
ENT, and he's got a
yeah
fellow practice and doing procedures. So how about funding? How do you go about telling people what's the best way of doing that, getting it paid for?
Yeah, so you got to have an audience first. So you determined who your audience was, right? And niche is very good. You don't have to go for the masses, right?
Right.
I'm going to tell a quick story about. I'm going to tell two quick stories, right? One is about a air conditioner technician who started his own podcast because, very similar to us, he felt like there was a need to share technical tips with his fellow air conditioning technicians, and they have a lot of driving time, similar to us who commute. They have a lot of driving time driving in between houses to fix their ACs, and he built that niche audience, right? And then before he knew it, he was able to sell advertising because they had all these air conditioning companies that want to get in front of air conditioning technicians that install air conditioners, right? So that's the value of niche. One more story.
Excellent.
Another one is about a guy who trains horses for horse racing trainer, and he, again, started a podcast talking just about horse racing. The whatever the tips about raising horses for to become premier racers, right? And before he knew it, he had a very significant following within that community, within that niche horse racing community of other trainers. And before he knew it, he had advertisers reaching out to him, and he sold out on all his inventory, like within like a whole year of content within a month, because they were like, no, we want to get in front of these trainers, like like whether it be horse feed or horse stable builders, all kinds of advertisers. Right. So it just shows the power of niche. You don't have to have an audience of 1 million downloads a month just to get State Farm Insurance podcast advertising.
Awesome.
Like, just focus on the niche.
So what should we expect with BackTable going forward? What other specialists are you going to bring on board, do you think?
So we're launching OBGYN in next month, actually in 4 weeks. So
wow.
That'll be our 5th show. So yeah. So in the vascular show, this is another plan that we may have. The vascular show, because it's still very IR heavy. I'm trying to bring on more cardiologists and vascular surgeons so that it's more of a collaborative endovascular show. And we may actually split off interventional from that. So like all the MSK and pain and spinal interventions that we do, that might be a separate show. Maybe something like BackTable Bones or something like that. And then we'll have, the flagship endovascular show. And then we'll have ENT, urology, MedTech innovation, and OBGYN. And then we'll keep going,
I think there's another important feature to having a successful podcast that you didn't mention that you're automatically doing, is that you have such a creative growth mindset. You don't say like, this is it and that's all there is. you constantly are thinking outside the box of how can I make this better? How can I make more, bring more interest? And look at you, you're living in you're living in Paris, and and and
Well,
making it happen there. How, I mean, how amazing is that? Taking a year off to go to Paris, and then you have the financial means to do that. So kudos to you. Thank
well,
you
not
so
that.
much.
Yeah, that's not. But that's not podcast money. That's just random. That was actually we sold our house at the peak of the market, but and it
Oh,
was good.
that's awesome too.
It was good timing. But yeah, no,
Mm,
I think and that's a good point, Elsie. Part of the reason that we're doing that is that we want BackTable to be more global. It's very U.S. focused right now. 80% of our listenership's in the U.S. And while U.S. advertisers like that, we feel like we're missing out on
huge
providing
opportunity.
good,
Yeah.
yeah, providing good content to India, to Europe, to Asia,
And
to
we know
South
that Europe
America,
is ahead
Africa.
of the game in innovation. So
Yes,
or Asia.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for this podcast. We went a little bit longer than I wanted, but
yeah.
I had to ask you these questions. Thank everybody for watching. If you have an idea on physician leadership, please reach out to me at info@drlcco.com. And if you're interested in leadership training for yourself or your peers, go to leadphysician.org. Aaron, thank you so much for being here. Any last words that you want to tell the audience?
No, I just want to let everybody know that I'm a podcast enthusiast, happy to help anybody launch their podcast. The last key pearl is good audio quality. You can notice that LC has a Shure microphone. I carry my microphone everywhere with me. Do not use your computer audio. That is key to getting people to listen to your podcast.
Right. And also go to his website at backtable.com so that you can be notified anytime there's a new podcast that comes on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Everyone, take care and keep doing what you're doing. Take care.